Hey everybody! Today I'm going to walk through a small tweak that I made to my Skyrim character bathing mod so that it's easier to stay clean while I'm wandering around in the wilderness, especially up in the colder regions where I'd freeze to death if I tried to bathe in water. Now I like immersion mods and I like to play in an air quote realistic way, so I didn't want to just disable the Frostfall mod for bathing. And I didn't really want to change the requires water setting in my bathing in Skyrim mod back and forth, depending on my location. And besides, that would be kind of simple, and why would I choose to do something the easy way? Yeah. Now, I actually have two bathing mods, Bathing in Skyrim and Simple Bathing. The main reason for having both is that I wanted to do exactly what I've just described, and Simple Bathing I thought would provide that solution. But the problem is that the Simple Bathing solution has you create an item at the cook pot, but then you have to consume it like a potion. And that kind of disturbs my realism sensibilities. And then the other issue is that Simple Bathing doesn't interact with Bathing in Skyrim buff or debuff system, which means that my character still looks filthy dirty even after quaffing her entire bath. Now, I should note here that this is all based on the previous version of Simple Bathing, version 1.3. There is a newer version 2.0, which looks like it adds a lot more functionality and may actually be sufficient on its own. According to the mod authors, I can't upgrade mid-playthrough, and it does look like it's a pretty extensive update, so I'm going to have to wait a while before I can check that out. Alright, for the old version 1.3 that I have, there is a patch that allows both Bathing in Skyrim and Simple Bathing to run together, but it's a really simple patch, and it really only patches the basic soap. It doesn't apply any of the scripting. But I took some inspiration from the Simple Bathing mod and created, or tweaked rather, the patch to make my own fix within the Bathing in Skyrim scripting system. Now, this took me longer to figure out than it should have, and I did make some mistakes the first time through, but it's all part of the learning process. I'll talk about those mistakes towards the end of the video, so you can easily skip that part if you really don't want to hear about my follies. Alright, so first things first, I had to try to figure out exactly how Bathing in Skyrim worked. So in the game, this is basically what happens. You buy or craft soap or a wash rag. You click on the item, or you can stand in water and use a hotkey to activate the script. First, there's a success check to see if you meet the appropriate conditions for bathing. If you have the mod set to requires water, like I do, then you have to be standing in deep enough water or the check will fail and you won't bathe. If the check succeeds, then the animation plays and you get a message saying that you are bathing, either with or without soap, depending on whether you used soap or just the wash rag. And once bathing is complete, you get a message saying that you feel clean with soap, or just cleaner with the wash rag. And in your active effects tab, you can see the results. Either buffs if you used soap, or at least no debuffs if you only used water. Now what I wanted to do was create an item that could be used without the, quote, "are you standing in water" success check. That way it could be used anywhere, and I could keep my normal setting to require water for a real bath. And just like a real bath versus sponging off, I wanted there to be a difference in how clean you could get. So this new item I wanted to only make you as clean as the wash rag, which is about 80% clean, and not as clean as soap, which is 100% clean. That should be enough to get rid of the visible dirtiness and the debuffs, and that's all I really need when I'm up in the mountains. Now, after spending a good bit of time looking at the structure of the Bathing in Skyrim mod in Test 5 Edit, I'd pieced together enough about how the mod worked under the hood to try tweaking it. So the key steps were, number one, I had to create a bathing item. I wanted to make it constructible so it could be crafted, and I had to assign it the proper keywords to work with the bathing scripts. I had to add one spell and one magic effect, both of which were specific for my new item. And then I had to reference the new item and spell in the appropriate form ID lists. So now we're going to walk through that in detail, and I'll show you exactly what I did. Now first, it's always a good idea to create your own mod or your own patch rather than modifying an existing one. So the very first thing I did was copy the Bathing in Skyrim/Simple Bathing patch into a new ESP. I did this by selecting the existing patch, or ESP, using Control-C and Control-V right in the Simple Bathing mod folder in Mod Organizer. I created a new copy, and then I gave it a new name. Now all the changes that I was going to make would be to my newly named copy, which is ultimately going to replace the original patch. So in Mod Organizer, I deactivate the original, and I activate my new one so I can pull it into Test5Edit for editing. I open up Test5Edit via Mod Organizer, and I find my new ESP. First, I create the item I want to use for activation of the bathing script. I'm making something called wash water, and I'm basing it on the Bathing in Skyrim wash rag, not soap, because I don't want soapy animations or any soap-based buffs. Now, I quite like the mesh that the Simple Bathing mod uses for its washing water, so I decided to use that. Now, unfortunately, that washing water is an ingestible item, so I can't just copy it directly from the Simple Bathing mod. Instead, I copied the soap that's already in the patch, and I just changed the mesh from the soap file to the washing water file. I gave it an editor ID of Simple Bath Wash Water and an in-game name of just Wash Water. Now, there's something important to note here that I originally overlooked while I was doing this, and that is that the soap record I copied has a non-playable flag, which was carried over into my new wash water item. This resulted in my wash water item not being visible in my inventory when I tested the patch. I had to go back into this record later to remove that flag, and that did fix the problem. Alright, so here I changed the model file name to the NIF for the mesh from Simple Bathing that I liked. Then I assigned the keyword mzinwashprop keyword to the item so it could be activated for bathing. I didn't use the soap keyword because I don't want it to behave like soap. Another step that I did here also, which is totally optional, was to replace the Bathing in Skyrim wash rag mesh. I hate the one that they used because it's based on the ugly Skyrim bloody rags, and they're just hideous. So I copied that miscellaneous item record as an override into my patch, and I changed it to a mesh that I like better, which is just the simple napkin or the bar rag mesh from Skyrim. Now that was a totally optional change based on my personal preference, and since it's just a mesh replacement, it has no bearing at all on the function of the mod or the patch. Alright, so now I have my new bathing item called Wash Water. Now I wanted to add a recipe to make it constructible. I copied an existing recipe record as a new record into my patch, and then I modified it to what I want. I'm making it so my wash water is crafted at the cooking pot, and that it requires both a wash rag and a bar of soap to make, both of which actually get used up when you craft the wash water. Now, the idea I based this on was that you could melt snow or warm up water at your cooking pot for a sponge bath. One downside to this is that my wash water item is not consumed upon use, and so it remains in my inventory until I take it out on purpose. Now, this is because I've made it act like the Bathing in Skyrim wash rag, which is also not consumed upon use. I could probably muck around and make my wash water a consumable, but that would require creating new keywords and new actions, and I really didn't want to make this any more complicated than it had to be. Alright, the next thing I had to do was to add a magic effect specific to my item that would run the bathing script if the conditions were met. I chose the wash rag record and I copied it over as a new record into my patch, and I called this mzin bathe attempt success SB wash water effect. So next I have to add a spell that's specific to my item that will run when the item is activated to see if the conditions are met for bathing. So I copied as a new record over into my patch, and I called this mzin bathe attempt SB wash water spell. Now I could have picked any of the existing records to copy because I was going to change it anyway, but I just used the wash rag one to be consistent. Then I changed my new record so that the pass-fail check would be based on having at least one of the wash water items in my inventory, instead of being based on whether or not I'm standing in water. Now what would be really cool is if I could create just wash water using my water skins from the I Need mod and make that wash water disappear after it's used, like what would really happen. But I felt like that would be too complicated and it would create yet another master for this patch. Maybe someday in the future I'll play around with that, but for now I really just wanted to do something simple. Next I had to add references in the form ID list to place my new item into the appropriate lists. For this, I copied 2 records as override into my new patch. The mzin wash prop list, which is a list of items that can be activated for bathing. And here I added my new item to the list. I also had to copy the mzin bathe attempt spell list, which is a list of spells, one for each bathing item, that runs the pass-fail check on whether conditions are met for bathing. And so here I added my new spell to the list. Finally, and this is not required, just optional, I also modified the message that's displayed when bathing without soap. To do this, I copied mzin bathing without soap message as override into my patch, and then I modified it to something that I liked better. And then it was done. I headed over into the game to try it out. Now you can see that it was working. I could craft the item appropriately, and I would use it to sponge off when I hit the bathing hotkey that I have set up in the mod. But the problem, as I mentioned earlier, is that my new wash water item was not actually showing up in my inventory. This was due to it having a non-playable flag, which is carried over from the record I had copied to make the new item. A quick jump back over into Test 5 Edit, and a few clicks later, the flag was removed, and then all was working well in the game. So all the original items, the wash rag and the soaps, could still not be used unless I was standing in water, but my new wash water item could be used anywhere, and it would get me as clean as the original wash rag setting in the Bathing in Skyrim mod. It would remove the visible dirt and the, quote, unclean debuff, but it would not apply any of the squeaky clean buffs that you get if you use soap. Now I mentioned earlier that I did a few things wrong when I first tried this. And, well, wrong is probably too strong of a word because my errors didn't actually mess anything up, but they were unnecessary. And I also had some misunderstandings about the mod that resulted in me agonizing over things I shouldn't have been worried about, and all of that made this originally take a lot longer than it should have. When I started copying records from Bathing in Skyrim over to my new patch, I ended up copying more than was actually needed. In the spell lines, I had copied over mzin soap bonus spell, which I didn't actually need to have because I'm not using my item as a soap. Similarly, in the form ID list lines, I had copied over mzin soap bonus list and mzin soap bonus message list. But again, I didn't need those because my item's not behaving like a soap. And finally, in the message lines, I had copied over and added a message called mzin bathing soap bonus message. And I had changed this to cover my own new item. But again, my item's not behaving like soap, and so I didn't need this. Now, like I said, it turns out I didn't need any of those because I originally had misunderstood what was happening in the Bathing in Skyrim mod. The reason I was confused is because there are records, or at least one record in particular, for the wash rag, which suggested that these things were going to happen, even though it doesn't technically act like a soap. However, I finally realized that because it doesn't have the soap keyword, the mod doesn't actually treat the wash rag like a soap. And so although there are some lines in there related to the wash rag that refer to soap, they're actually not being used. So I'm guessing this is either left over from maybe a template that the mod author used to create all the items, or perhaps it was just an early thought of what they wanted the wash rag to do, and that ended up getting changed later on, and these lines just stayed in the mod. All right, the other problem I had was just me simply not paying attention. Now, I wanted my item to behave like the Bathing in Skyrim wash rag and not like the soap, as I've already said. The wash rag only washes with water, and so you don't get any soapy animations. You just get plain ones. You don't get the clean buff, and you only get clean to the level called not dirty, which is about 20% by default. Now, this not only confused me while I was trying to make the tweaks in Test 5 Edit, but it aggravated me for probably an hour or so while I was testing in-game, because I couldn't figure out why I was only getting to 20% clean. And I couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting the messages that I'd added during the bathing process or in my active effects afterwards. Now, those messages were related to the soap lines that I had added in, which I already said were unnecessary and not being used. So it turns out that because my wash water item is not soap, it was behaving just like the wash rag, and that was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, and I was just being stupid. So the lesson learned here is to be sure you really understand what a mod is doing before you start messing with it. Alrighty, so with the confusion cleared up and the patch seemingly working as intended, let me just summarize the steps. So first, create a miscellaneous item to serve as the activation point and give it keywords for being a wash prop and, if desired, a soap. Number 2, create a record that allows the item to be crafted, if you'd like it to be craftable. Number 3, create a new magic effect record for your item that will allow bathing to ensue if the conditions are successfully met. Number 4, create a spell record for your item which performs the bathing attempt check based on whatever criteria you want. If desired, you would also create the soap bonus spell record for whatever bonus you want your item to provide after bathing with it. Number 5, and this is optional, create a new message record if your item is going to behave like soap. Number 6, add the item to MZin's form ID wash prop list, and if you've made it a soap, to the form ID soap bonus list. Number 7, add the new bathe attempt spell, and if you made a soap item, the soap bonus message also to those form ID lists. And that should be it. So thanks for coming along on yet another modding adventure with me. I hope that you enjoyed the trip, and I'll see you next time.